there's charts and there's numbers and there's talk about this security and that investment. And we think that that is retirement and financial planning, and it's not.
What does it really mean to be financially accountable? And what role do financial planners have in it? Today, we're breaking down how accountability shows up across every stage of life and how these important lessons can and should be shared with younger generations so they can be financially confident in the future. Hello, and welcome to Money on Your Mind from Edelman Financial Engines. I'm Michael Liersch, a behavioral scientist, financial planner, and your chief planning officer at EFE. Thanks for joining us for a conversation about how people are feeling about money, what they're wrestling with, and how financial planning can help you straighten things out. Today, we're talking with financial planner Kelli Smith. She is an excellent human being planner. She's been with us for well over a decade and been planning with clients. Kelli, welcome to Money on Your Mind.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me.
So, Kelli, what we like to do on the podcast is have you share a little bit about your personal journey to becoming a planner and why you love working with clients around their financial plans.
Yeah. So my journey is interesting. It's long. I was a finance background. As I was going through college, led me to this company. And over time, I decided that getting out in front of people was really where I wanted to be. So I started off in one of our offices in Kansas City, and a few years later, made my way out to North Carolina, just slightly different opportunity for my family. So I've been out in Raleigh now for, since 2019. So it's been pretty fantastic meeting the people around here.
Wow, that's wonderful. And tell us a little bit about why you like being a planner.
There's so many reasons. I thought, as an analytical person, I thought I'm really going to help people, right? I'm gonna give them the logic, and they're going to get it, and they're going to feel it. And then over time, I think my perspective changed as I realized how much emotion there is in money, how much people feel it, and so I really found myself just being able to connect with people a little bit differently, speak to them in ways that maybe they haven't been spoken to before when it comes to money, and in that way, those people that I connect with, we get to have great conversations about their retirement and their financial plans.
So, Kelli, when we then think about what your clients are asking you about, the questions you're getting, and you have these two, areas of conversation about, the positions and the securities and the risk and asset allocation, but then you also have the conversation about what the money's for and the emotions behind it, the past experiences that are driving decisions now and in the future, even those around family. Tell us a bit about what you're hearing from your clients and how does this all relate to this concept of financial accountability?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something I get very excitable. And I always tell people when they come to my office, I have to remind myself to slow down because I get very excited talking about it. Um, Folks will always ask, this is happening in Washington, or this is happening in Iran, or whatever the topic is. There's always some topic that we talk about. And we spend a lot more time talking about those things, or the financial aspect of retirement, and not nearly enough time talking about what it means to be retired. Right? What are you
Okay.
retiring to? And that's where the conversation really changes, because we now have to dig into, well, how are you living today? Right? What does that look like for you? Not just from how are you going to spend your time, but what is it going to cost? Are there things that you're doing today that you won't in the future, and vice versa? What are you not doing today that you want to do in the future? So, from my perspective, if we can shift away from the things that we can't control and focus more on the things we can, it helps us get out in front of those hard conversations when Washington does something or they don't do something, whatever that looks like. So, we want to focus on the things we can control, so we can put together structure in a way that's meaningful for every person who's getting ready to retire. But if I don't know what's on your bucket list or what's not, it's really hard for us to start projecting what you might need in the future. And I think that's the most important key here in all of this is you got to think about what it means to be retired. I mean, don't focus on the numbers that we haven't even talked through yet. Let's just talk about what it means to be retired.
I love this idea because then you're right. You're starting to kind of back into the conversation we had about the conflict of Iran and
Mhm.
Iran, energy prices, gas prices, all those kinds of things. So when then we get to how people are actually then sharing that information with you and sticking to that plan, this financial accountability component of it, how do you see people behaving? Are they spending more than they are telling you? Are they spending less? Do they feel badly about what they're spending on or about their plan? Like what's going on here these days?
I'm sure you can imagine it kind of runs the gamut of all of those things. But I always tell people, the first time they come in, like, I'm not here to judge. This is not my money. It's not my plan. We have different sets of values, and that's okay. I'm here to make happen whatever is you want to happen, right? So we have to start by defining that. And that's where the accountability comes in. If you're not telling me what you want for your plan, because you don't want to be honest with yourself, or you just don't want to take time to think about it, which is, we're all busy. It's much more difficult to plan for something if we don't know the variables that are going into it. Try putting together a puzzle that's upside down, right? We don't have the picture to see how the
I'm
pieces fit
usually
together.
relegated to the upside down part of the table, by the way, Kelly.
Yes.
So I know how hard that is, right?
Yes.
Everyone else gets to sit on the right side up part. So
Yeah. So you can't see, but we want to put the puzzle together with the pieces up so we can see how this picture comes together. I think the first and foremost thing is you should never be ashamed of what you're doing with your money, right? If you're being accountable to yourselves, say spending wisely. I know there's some of us that, there's some debt out there. And there's different ways that you can bridge that gap with another conversation. But be honest with yourselves about what you're spending, and I always start with your net paycheck, right? On each of your paycheck, it's how much you make, but then all the deductions and taxes and things that come out, and you get this final amount that goes into your bank account, right? Start with that number, right? You don't have to budget. If you don't have time, if that's just not really your thing, you don't have to budget. If you bring home X amount of dollars and that's the money that goes out the door, then your retirement plan should plan for X amount of dollars, so that way you can continue the lifestyle that you want. And then, of course, we make adjustments more or less depending on whether you're a homebody or want to go travel.
let's say you're spending more than's coming in the door. Give us like an interaction around that
Mhm.
versus someone who's spending far less than what's coming in the door. What do those different conversations look like?
Yep. So for somebody who's spending more than they have coming in the door, they're likely accumulating debt. We just have to better understand, and that's a conversation. Again, when I tell people we're going to have a conversations different than what you're used to, we're going to sit down and talk about how they spend their money, not as an exercise in judgment, but as this is where it's going. Are you just spending too much in some areas, or do we just not have enough money coming in the door? Right. I tell people that your greatest asset is your earning potential. So if we need to do something else in order to bridge the gap to make ends meet, that's different than I just want to go, buy all the things that I want because my neighbors have it. But I get to figure out what that looks like, and then we even dive a little bit further into that. That conversation is, do you need this? Are these the things that are going to make you happy? Is what you're spending your money on? Does that make you happy? Are you finding it fulfilling? And if it's not fulfilling, then what is fulfilling? Right. And that's really what we're trying to do. And that's what money is all about, is trying to find a way that we're feeling good about where our money goes, and we're spending in a way that's very important to us.
And what does that look like with partners or spouses when they're talking to you? Is there usually differences in those feelings? Are they feeling similarly? Tell me about that.
Sometimes they're similar. It's also a lot of fun for the folks who don't necessarily agree, because you're still two different people, and that's okay. And part of the planning process is making sure that we're setting things up in a way that's meaningful to both. And so it just really means that we have to dive into, and again, people need to be honest with me and each other, about what is important, and making sure that we are allocating funds in a way that's meaningful for both people.
In things like kids and grandkids, when they're observing this
Mhm.
type of tension, money coming in the door, spending more, how does that actually manifest itself in terms of how those younger human beings behave, act, see the world? You probably have a different lens than most on that.
Um, I do to some degree. I think I just in my experience, some of the exercises I've done with my own children is I don't think that we do generally as Americans do a very good job of being very open with our kids about how we handle money. And part of it is because we feel bad about the way we handle money. So there's some shame in there. But the other piece of it is we try to protect them or we do it for them. Right. And so if we are just honest and spouses should be having conversations about money in front of children so they can see how you collaborate, what your differences are and understand that it's okay that you feel a little differently about money. They need to see how you come together and solve it. They need to see how the house is paid for. They need to understand what a mortgage is. Just like, it's a life skill that we teach them, like laundry or changing the oil in their car. And so, for me, what I've done with my kids is, they want to do a lemonade stand. Great. You're going to make a business plan. I'm not donating your supplies here. So you're going to put together a business plan and figure out how much it's going to cost to put it together, how much cost per cup. So how much should you charge per cup? All right. And then kind of work backwards into, am I really going to make money at doing this? Now, yes, I have sapped all the fun out of lemonade stands for my kids. But also they're very good stewards of their money generally because they understand the price of the things that go into everything that they want.
So my brother and I, we grew up in very like humble circumstances, like no money available to us for allowance or anything. So we actually sold lemonade on the public golf course and on the fifth hole, I remember. And so we had to buy the lemonade ourselves and make it and buy those cups. So we just naturally learned those lessons. And I will say it was tons of fun at the end because we could see the delta between what we spent and what we made. And then my brother and I got to go, and I'm not saying everyone should do this, but we went to the candy. You remember like the local candy stores? We went there and bought as much candy as we possibly could and like hoarded it to ourselves and had a great time. It's interesting to your point, we've gotten out of the habit potentially as Americans in teaching these lessons. And potentially it's because money is so digital these days. It's hard to have those tangible dollars and cents. And then there's also the fear of, observing our children or them being out of our observation, right? All these different dynamics that prevent these lessons from being learned. So what I'm hearing you say is you kind of have to be very intentional and design them on purpose. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you were probably, where did you get the money for your supplies? Did you mow lawns? Did some people deliver
Babysat,
papers? Yeah. I
babysitting.
mean, but, some kids do that now, but not many. And I've got clients all over the country and this is not isolated to my neighborhood. This is all over the country. So they don't really realize that you buy the supplies with money that you have to earn, right? So you and I probably cycled through a process, and so we could appreciate the candy that we bought at the store because we did in fact earn that. But if I'm donating supplies, as many parents do these days, donate the supplies, and then kids get to keep the money. They didn't learn anything from it. Maybe they had fun doing, but they didn't learn anything from it, and they don't get that warm and fuzzy feeling that comes from hard work.
And the value of that coin or that dollar in
That's
their
right.
hand. Yeah. For people where they actually are spending a lot less than what's coming in, can you tell us a little bit about that dynamic? Because it's almost on the flip side, but I wonder if there's similar conversations you have about values and peace of mind and feeling good. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so that's kind of a unique standpoint. Not unique, it's not uncommon, right? But it is a different viewpoint. And so, there are folks who, and I do have several people that will spend less than they make. And I have to get down to the why. Why do they do that? Right? Everything comes down to why. What's driving that? Obviously the closer they are to the older generation, if they were just used to scrimping because they didn't know where it's coming from, or people who started from humble beginnings, right? And they can tend to cling a little bit more tightly, and that's okay. And my job is to make sure that they know what that looks like in the future. Somebody's going to spend your money. You get to decide who and how and when. And that's part of, we've talked about estate planning and stuff in the past, in past episodes. What what do you envision for your money, right? If you're not spending it, or maybe can I just convince you on your next trip? Will you stay in a slightly nicer hotel, or will you, buy the first class ticket? Like these incremental things. We don't have to abandon our values to spend more money, but we can enhance our experience in doing so and lean into it because we worked hard to do that. But again, the end result of that is if you're going to have a lot of money left, let's talk a bit more about what's meaningful to you and how do you see your legacy going on in guiding your kids, right? More conversations with your kids and your grandkids about, maybe college is important or education or, what they want to do with it, but helping them buy a home, right? It's not just how you spend it, but how you give and gift it too.
I love this idea of, if you're not saving and investing for yourself or a spouse or a partner, or, dependents, where is that money going to go? Who's going to use it? And how do you organize and coordinate it so it's being used in a way that gives you joy, gives you value? I get that, Kelly. And also provides that same joy and value to the recipient. And that's a whole nother podcast episode, Kelly.
Yep. Yep.
So I appreciate you bringing it up. Perhaps we'll have to bring you back for a part two.
Always happy to
And
do that.
we'll get into that. So tell us really quickly. We have two questions we'd like to ask, which is first, I'm going to ask you what's one mistake you're seeing clients make right now, and then I also am going to ask you what's one thing every listener should do right now based on this conversation. So let's get into the one mistake. What's one mistake you see clients making right now?
Yep. So I'm probably going to echo all my colleagues before me, but it's focusing on the things we can't control and not enough on the things we can, which also I think goes right to what do I want them to do? What do I want them to focus on? That is putting together a plan in an accountable way so that you're already prepared for all those things that we can't control. Right? You're going to stress test it before those things happen. And that is just an inherent part of the planning process is making sure everything is structured. I always tell clients that do something now so you can do nothing later, right? We don't want to be making changes down the road when things happen because we've already put it in place.
So I love this. Do the hard work today so tomorrow you can do either less hard work or have the option to do less hard work. So that's great. If I'm hearing you right, the mistake is really focusing on the things that are out of our control rather than things right in front of us.
Yep.
And being super intentional and accountable to oneself around it, or having an accountability partner like someone like you, Kelly, a financial professional. So love that. And then it sounds like from an action standpoint, the one thing everyone should be doing is really creating that plan and monitoring it regularly to see if you're holding yourself accountable.
My clients, even though my clients may call me sometimes if something's happening in Washington that has them concerned, nobody ever asks to make a change. They already know that we've stress tested their plan. They already know that we've talked about this, but they already know we've gotten out in front of it. And so we can have a conversation about what's happening, but there's so much peace that comes from just making sure that you have a plan that's a reflection of you, because it makes it a lot more comfortable to navigate these uncertain times.
Well, Kelly, I want to say this has been a really fantastic conversation. I think extremely timely given all that's going on right in this moment. Any last words before we close it out?
No, thanks for having me. I hope we get to come back sometime.
Yeah, I'm thinking we are going to have to dig into this idea of gifting. So everyone might see you again soon, Kelly. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's everything we have for today. This has been Money on Your Mind. A big thanks to financial planner Kelli Smith for joining me, and we'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss it, and we'd appreciate it if you left a rating too. I'm Michael Liersch from Edelman Financial Engines. Talk to you next time.